What's the most powerful permission in Active Directory? It's domain admin. And here are the top 3 ways I got it in 2024 and how you can do it in 2025. Think of domain admin as the highest permission you can have in an internal Active Directory network. Now, you might be asking, what even is Active Directory? Well, when you log into your computer, you typically just use your username and password, right? Well, when you're a company managing hundreds or even thousands of computers, it gets a little difficult to do that. And that's why you need some type of identity manager to control access to the accounts and resources in your environment. And that's where Active Directory comes into play. Active Directory is one of the most widely used identity managers in the world, with over 90% of Fortune 1000 companies using Active Directory. And as a pen tester, you should always be trying to raise your privileges to domain admin, since it gives you the most access into a network. Now that we understand a little bit more why domain admin is so important, let's dive into one of the top techniques I use to get domain admin in 2024, and that's through SMB Relay. So what is SMB? SMB stands for Server Message Block, and it's used to share and manipulate files over a network, provide access to printers, and request other services that might be on the network. It is used in just about every single Windows environment. But the bad thing about it is it provides a huge threat surface to things called relay attacks, which we'll get into. So how is SMB vulnerable to relay attacks? The core issue when it comes to SMB relay attacks comes down to the authentication mechanism, especially when you're using NTLM. When a user wants access to a resource, SMB initiates a connection from that computer to the Active Directory environment using the NTLM hash. And threat actors use that authentication attempt to then relay and impersonate that user to a different machine. And this, especially when it's coupled with local admin privileges, leads to a lot of damage and a lot of potential to lead to domain admin. So what do you need for this attack? The target that you're trying to relay to needs to have SMB signing disabled. This degrades the integrity of the SMB request and is the main culprit for why this attack works. The second thing you need is local admin of the hash that you're stealing. You don't need it to get some type of foothold, but you really want local admin when you're trying to get that credentialed access deeper into the network so you can dump those hashes. And the third thing to know is you can't relay credentials to the same machine that they were captured from. So you can't relay from one machine to the same machine. It has to be 2 different machines involved for this. And then just another good thing to note is that since you're relaying these hashes, the password complexity doesn't matter. You could have a 50 character password and this attack will still work the same because you're already getting the hash of that password. You need to identify assets on the network that don't have SMB signing enabled. 2, you need to set up some type of poisoner on the network to gather the hashes. Really, the go-to tool here will be Responder. And then 3, you need to relay those hashes. So you're using something like NTLM Relay X to relay those hashes to the assets without, the key thing is without SMB signing enabled, to be able to either get some proxy connections or to dump the SAM hashes off the local computer that gives you access to local administrators. A lot of times I'll be in environments where the local admin password will be the same everywhere, or that same local admin password is just used for some type of other domain admin account. So those are kind of the high level attack process for SMB relay. Now we're going to go off to the second technique, which is one of my favorites, and that's attacking Active Directory through Active Directory certificate services. So Spectre Ops is one of the leaders in offensive security research, and they came out with these white papers on common misconfigurations found in Active Directory certificate services that lead to domain admin. In the description below, you'll find a link to the GitHub and the white papers that you can go ahead, dig in, and get into the real nitty gritty of what's happening behind the scenes. Because they came out with not one and not two, but 13, at the time of this recording, 13 different attack techniques that you can use within Active Directory certificate services. Now, we're not going to get into all 13 here, but we'll kind of go into the most common ones I saw in at least 2024. So moving on to the first one, we'll go to ESC1. ESC1 is when a certificate template permits a client authentication and allows the enrollee to supply an arbitrary subjective alternative name. What the heck did I just say? So really what that means in layman's terms is that any domain user or domain computer, whatever the certificate template settings are set to, can request a certificate on the behalf of another user, in this case a domain administrator, and use that certificate to then authenticate as that user. So you have regular Joe Schmo from accounting wanting to request a certificate on the behalf of a domain admin, the biggest privilege in the Active Directory network, and then using that certificate to authenticate into Active Directory and doing whatever mayhem you want to cause. The next one that I commonly see is ESC4, which is basically when domain users have way too many permissions on the actual certificate template itself and can make changes to the certificate template. So usually what this leads to is that you gain control of the certificate template, you make an edit to it to make it then normal to ESC1, which we just talked about, and then you just rinse and repeat that cycle of ESC1. The last one that I most commonly see is ESC8, and this is kind of similar to SMB relay in terms of it's another relay attack, just a different technique. So for ESC8, you see a HTTP endpoint on ADCS, Active Directory Certificate Services, and you use that endpoint to relay authentication to HTTP. And because HTTP is unencrypted, I think you can see where I'm getting at here. The issue with this is that you either have to wait for authentication, which is not cool at all. Who wants to wait around when you're trying to hack an entire company? So what we typically do here is we coerce authentication from a machine account to that HTTP endpoint. So we'll use tools like Petit Potam or Coercer to try to make that authentication happen. And there, like I said, there's 13 techniques, but those are the three that I commonly use. And like I mentioned earlier, Spectre Ops is one of the leaders in offensive security and have blessed us with research revolving around Microsoft SCCM, which is the last technique that I used to get domain admin in 2024. So on to the last technique is going to be through something called SCCM, System Centers Configuration Manager. This is a tool created by Microsoft to manage servers and endpoints across an Active Directory enterprise environment. This is going to be a system administrator's best friend if they know how to use it, or worst nightmare if they're struggling to configure it. As an attacker, it's got a huge attack surface full of misconfigurations most of the time that unfortunately a lot of companies are just unaware of. In the description below, we'll get into a GitHub link listed as Misconfiguration Manager that has a bunch of attack techniques and defenses against SCCM. Like I said, we're not going to get into every single technique here, but we'll at least get into the one that I saw the most, which is through the NAA policy, the Network Access Account Policy. This is an account created through SCCM for clients to request network access resources through SCCM through the distribution point. So this account is used to access distribution points during client enrollment, and then during that machine enrollment, authenticated users receive something called the NAA config, which has obfuscated secrets that an attacker can then deobfuscate and then use to then gain access to the NAA account, which typically is overly permissive and either has the domain admin on certain machines or it's just flat out domain administrator. Like I mentioned, we're not going to get into the real nitty gritty of how to perform this technique. That'll be in a future video, so tune in next time. But you can refer to the GitHub link on how to perform this attack. That's it, everybody. Those are the top 3 ways I got domain admin in 2024. And now in 2025, you guys are ready to hit the ground running. I hope you were able to get something out of this video. If you didn't, I'll be coming out with videos in the future on the techniques on how to perform them and defend against them. Thanks for hanging around until now. And until then, happy hacking.